We were halfway down the old gravel road when the field began to open up golden and wide, just like I remembered. The silence between me and Clayton wasn't uncomfortable. It was filled with the kind of ease that only years of knowing someone could offer. He drummed his fingers lightly against the dashboard, humming to the country song playing low on the radio. While I kept my hands firm on the wheel, my eyes fixed on the horizon where my grandfather's land rose like a forgotten memory. The house appeared in the distance, small and hunched, wrapped in vines and weathered by time. I hadn't been back in almost 5 years. After Grandpa passed, no one had. Mom couldn't bring herself to sell it. And I guess I hadn't been ready to face the ghosts either. Clayton turned to me and grinned. So this is it, huh? The infamous farm you never shut up about. I laughed, surprised by how natural it felt. Infamous is a stretch. It's mostly dust and creaking floorboards now. I don't know, he said, squinting at the horizon. It looks like the kind of place where time stopped on purpose. That line stuck with me. Clayton had a way of saying things that sounded casual, but hit deeper than expected. He wasn't the loudest guy, never had been, but when he talked, I listened, maybe because there was always something just under the surface, like he was revealing only part of the story. We parked near the old barn, the tires crunching to a halt. Stepping out, I was hit with the thick scent of earth and dry wood. The place was untouched. Even the mailbox still had my grandfather's name etched in faded ink. I ran my hand along it, brushing off years of dust. You sure it's safe? Clayton asked, eyeing the leaning porch. Nope, I replied, but that's part of the charm. Inside it was dark, the air stale with silence. We pushed open the windows, letting the breeze roll in. Dust danced in the light, like tiny memories refusing to settle. I moved through each room slowly. Familiar corners, familiar creaks, and flashes of a younger version of me running through these halls in muddy boots. Clayton followed, quiet at first, until he paused near the living room. Your grandpa, he lived here alone? After Grandma died. Yeah, said he preferred it that way. That's got to get lonely. I shrugged. He said people underestimate the kind of company silence can give. He didn't respond right away. Just nodded and walked over the mantel where a framed photograph leaned sideways. He picked it up carefully and blew away the dust. My grandparents, younger, smiling, a life that once felt so big, now reduced to a still image in a quiet house. We spent the next hour airing things out, cleaning just enough to sleep. The house didn't need to be perfect. It just needed to breathe again. By late afternoon, we sat on the back steps with bottles of soda, watching the sky turn amber. The breeze had cooled, and the fields rustled gently, like they remembered our footsteps even after all these years. Why'd you ask me to come? Clayton asked suddenly. The question caught me off guard. I looked down at the bottle in my hand, condensation dripping down my fingers. I don't know. Thought you'd want a break from the city. Figured it'd be good. Yeah, he said. It is. But something in his voice made me glance up. He wasn't looking at the field. He was looking at me. For a second, I didn't know what to say. My heart kicked up a little. This wasn't new. We'd always walked that blurry line between friendship and something more. But we never talked about it. Not really. You ever think about leaving the city? He asked, eyes still on me. Sometimes. Think you'd ever move back here? I smiled faintly. Only if someone gave me a reason. He didn't reply. Just took another sip and looked back out across the land, his jaw tight like he was biting back something. The silence that followed wasn't quite the same. That night, we laid out our sleeping bags in the living room side by side. No beds, just two friends under one roof, listening to hum of crickets and occasional creak of old wood settling. The air was cooler than I remembered, and the floor a bit less forgiving, but it didn't matter. Thanks for letting me come, Clayton said, voice low in the dark. I'm glad you did. We lay there, neither of us sleeping, just the soft rhythm of our breathing in the quiet. At one point, his hand brushed mine. Not by accident, I knew that much. But neither of us moved or spoke. It was a moment suspended, tender and tentative. Something was changing. I could feel it, as surely as I felt the weight of the farm pressing into me. The memories, the quiet, and now him, I stared at the wooden beams overhead, replaying the way he looked at me on the steps, the way his voice dipped when he asked about moving back. It wasn't just a visit. At least, not for me. The morning light slipped into the thin curtains, stretching long fingers across the wooden floorboards. I woke to the scent of earth and old wood, the kind that only settles into a house when no one has lived in it for years. Clayton was already up, sitting cross-legged by the fireplace, sipping black coffee from a chipped mug he must have dug out of the back cabinet. His hair was messy, his hoodie wrinkled, and he looked entirely out of place in the room, yet oddly like he belonged. "You make enough for two?" I asked, rubbing my eyes. He held up the thermos with a sleepy grin. "You doubted me? I never doubt caffeine loyalty." He poured me a cup, and we sat in the quiet, the kind of quiet that felt earned rather than awkward. Outside, the wind moved slowly through the trees, brushing against the house like it remembered us too. "I didn't sleep much," he admitted after a while. "Bad dreams." He shook his head. "Just thinking, I guess." I didn't ask what about. I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Instead, I took a long sip of the bitter coffee and focused on the way the sunlight hit the dust in the air, floating like memories that hadn't yet settled. Later that day, we wandered around the property. The barn was still standing, though one side sagged a little more than I remembered. Inside, the smell of hay and rust clung to the walls. I found an old horseshoe near the corner stall and held it up. "Grandpa used to say these kept bad luck away," I said. Clayton took it from me, turning it in his hands. "Think it still works?" I smiled. "We might need it." We spent the next hour pulling back weeds and clearing out the porch. Clayton surprised me with how into it he got, rolling up his sleeves, digging his hands into the dirt, cursing every time a thorn caught him. There was something different about him here, something softer. Or maybe I was just seeing him more clearly. As the sun began to dip, the air turned heavier, thick with humidity. A storm was coming. We could both feel it. The clouds pressed low against the horizon, dark and slow-moving. Back inside, we lit a few candles just in case the power went. The wind had picked up, rattling the shutters and whistling through the cracks in the windows. We made sandwiches and sat cross-legged on the floor, eating by candlelight like kids at a sleepover. "You ever think about what you'd be doing if you'd made different choices?" Clayton asked, chewing slowly. "Every day," I said. "You." "All the time." There was a pause, the kind that begged for honesty. "You ever regret any of them?" I asked. He didn't look at me, just stared into the flickering candle flame. "Some," he said. "But most of the time, I think things happen the way they're meant to, even the bad stuff." I wanted to believe that. I really did. The storm finally broke, lightning flashing across the fields, thunder shaking the old bones of the house. We watched it from the window, our shoulders touching, neither of us pulling away. "You ever been in love?" I asked, not even sure why the words came out. Clayton exhaled through his nose. "I thought I was. Once." "What happened?" He looked at me then, eyes unreadable. He left. Or maybe I pushed him. Either way, it didn't last. "I'm sorry." He gave a small shrug. "It's just one of those things." We sat in silence for a while, listening to the storm move around us. The room felt smaller somehow, more intimate in the flickering light. When it was time to sleep, we returned to our makeshift beds in the living room. I lay there staring at the ceiling, heart heavier than the storm outside. Clayton shifted beside me, restless. "I like today," he said softly. "Yeah," I whispered. "Me too." A pause. Then his voice, quieter still. "I haven't felt this okay in a long time." That did something to me. Made my chest tighten. Made me want to reach out and say what I'd been swallowing for years. But instead, I turned toward him, barely able to make out the shape of his face in the dark. His hand found mine again, this time, not by accident. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. For a moment, it felt like something was blooming in the quiet. Something tender. Something real. But just as quickly the thought came, too easy, too soon. Something about it felt fragile, like it could all fall apart with the wrong word. Still, I didn't let go, and neither did he. The next morning, I woke to the sound of voices, muffled but urgent. It took a moment to realize Clayton wasn't in his sleeping bag beside me. I followed the faint sound toward the porch, quietly easing open the front door. He stood facing away, phone pressed to his ear, his free hand gesturing sharply as he paced. His voice was low, but the words still carried. No, I'm telling you, it's not about pressure. He trusts me. He'll listen. Yeah, I'm working on it. The wind shifted, and I stepped back before he could notice me. My heart thudded. I wasn't sure what I'd heard exactly, but I knew how it felt. Off. Covert. Nothing like the honesty of the night before. When he came back inside, he flashed me that easy smile like nothing had happened. You sleep okay? Yeah, I lied. You did a quick check of the weather. Should be clear the next couple days. He dropped his phone onto the couch like it didn't matter. You still want to see the barn roof? You said it was half caved in. I nodded, but there was a weight now. A question I couldn't yet form. We walked out together, boots crunching over brittle grass. He carried a toolbox he'd found in the shed, claimed he wanted to try and patch a few holes before the next rain. I followed, watching him more closely now. Something about the way he moved felt rehearsed, like he was performing the role of a friend or something more, but not fully being it. The barn was darker than I remembered. Sunlight streamed through cracks in the roof, illuminating patches of dust in the air. We worked side by side, lifting broken boards, clearing space. We barely spoke. I found myself drifting toward the back corner, where an old cabinet sat. It still had my grandfather's initials carved into the side. I opened it gently, and there, tucked beneath a faded flannel shirt, was a stack of envelopes. One of them had my name on it. The handwriting was shaky, familiar. My throat tightened. I turned it over and opened it slowly. Inside was a letter from my grandfather, dated the year he passed. It was short, just a few paragraphs, but every word hit with weight. Tanner, this land will be yours. People may try to tell you what it's worth, or what you should do with it. Don't let them. This place holds more than money. It holds roots. If you ever doubt someone's reason for being close, listen to your gut. It knows more than you think. I read it twice. Then again, I folded it carefully and slipped it into my pocket, heart pounding. Clayton was at the front of the barn, hammering down a loose nail. I walked over slowly, trying to steady my voice. Hey, you said earlier someone might try to convince me to sell. Was that just hypothetical? He looked up, just a flicker in his eyes. A brief pause. Why? No reason. Just, you'd tell me if someone was pushing you about this place, right? Of course, he said too quickly. Why would I lie? That should have reassured me. It didn't. We spent the rest of the afternoon clearing brush along the back fence. The work was mindless, and the silence between us stretched. I kept replaying that call. The letter. The way his face changed when I asked. That night, Clayton stepped outside to get some air. I waited until I saw the screen door shut behind him, then reached for his phone. It was reckless, desperate even, but I needed to know. The lock screen lit up. No passcode. A text thread at the top caught my eye. A contact labeled K. Appraisers ready for the weekend. Just get him to agree before then. Don't push too hard. Play it slow. My stomach dropped. The front door creaked behind me, and I froze. What are you doing? Clayton's voice was low, tight. I turned slowly, holding the phone in my hand. I could ask you the same. He took a step forward, but stopped when he saw the screen. His jaw tensed. It's not what you think. Really? Because it looks like you came here for one reason, and it wasn't nostalgia. He ran a hand through his hair. I didn't plan on lying. I was going to tell you. When? After I handed it over? After you made your offer? After I thought maybe, just maybe, you care about more than a piece of dirt? He looked away. I came because the land's worth something, he admitted. I didn't lie about that. But the rest of it, it wasn't fake, Tanner. I meant every moment. I shook my head. Don't do that. Don't try to hold on to the part you didn't destroy. He stepped forward again, slower this time. You don't know how hard it's been trying to get back on my feet. This deal could have set me up. So you used me? I didn't mean to. At first, I just saw a way out. But then being here with you, it changed things. But not enough, I said. Not enough to tell the truth. We stood in the middle of the living room, shadows flickering across our faces from the candle still burning on the mantel. He looked like he wanted to say more, but he didn't, and I didn't ask. He turned and walked upstairs without another word. I stayed where I was, letter still folded in my pocket, heart splitting between anger and something worse, disappointment. By morning, Clayton was gone. No note, no footsteps, just absence, sharp and unmistakable. The sleeping bag beside mine was empty, half-folded. The boots he'd left by the door were gone, too. I stood in the doorway for a long time, waiting for the sound of tires on gravel, for a joke, for anything. But there was only wind moving to the fields and the soft creak of the porch settling beneath me. He'd walked out the same way he came in, quiet, unfinished. I found his phone charger still plugged into the wall, a half-drunk bottle of water on the table, and the scent of his cologne lingering faintly in the air. I hated how my body still recognized it, hated how much space he still took up in a room he no longer stood in. Eventually, I stopped looking for goodbye. I spent the day walking the property alone. The barn was still damp from the storm, the fields alive with insects and birds returning to their routines. Everything felt louder without him here. Every footstep, every breeze against the grass, every broken board I stepped over. I hadn't realized how deeply his presence had wrapped itself around the place until it was gone, near the lake at the edge of the property. I sat on the same log where Grandpa used to fish in the mornings. The air smelled like wet soil and moss, the kind of smell that stayed on your clothes for days. I pulled the letter from my pocket and read it again, slowly this time. Don't let them tell you what it's worth. Clayton never saw this letter. He never had the chance. Maybe he wouldn't have cared even if he had. Or maybe he would have seen himself in the warning and walked away before we ever got this far. I wasn't sure which was worse. Back at the house, I opened every window, let the place breathe again. The storm had passed, but I wanted the wind to clear out what was left of him. The quiet no longer felt like company. It felt like a lesson. I found a photograph in the hallway closet I hadn't noticed before. It was of me, younger, maybe 7 or 8, sitting beside Grandpa on the porch steps. He had one arm slung over my shoulder, a smile tucked into the edge of his mouth. I hadn't thought about that day in years. He'd told me then that some things can't be rebuilt once they break, that people sometimes leave without warning, and the only thing you can do is decide what to carry and what to leave behind. I kept the photo. I tossed the rest, old brochures, unopened mail, yellowing newspapers that no longer mattered. I cleared space. I made the old house livable again, not perfect, but mine. And when the sun began to set, I stood out by the fence line, watching it pour gold across the hills, staining the land in a warmth I hadn't felt since I was a boy. The wind stirred the wheaten waves, moving like breath. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just stood there and let it all settle, the loss, the clarity, the truth of what had always been just beneath the surface. Clayton hadn't ruined me. He hadn't even broken me. He'd only shown me the value of something I hadn't fully seen before. Love isn't real when it comes with terms. And trust isn't trust if it's only borrowed. That night, I lit the fireplace for the first time since arriving. I sat on the rug with a cup of tea and read aloud the letter one last time before tucking it into a drawer. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring or how long I'd stay on the farm, but I knew this. I wasn't leaving empty. I'd been loved, maybe poorly, maybe temporarily, but even false love leaves traces. And sometimes, know where the cracks are makes the house stronger. As the flames flickered across the walls and the house settled around me, I thought of Clayton somewhere far away, driving towards something he thought would fix him. Maybe one day he'd look back and wonder if it was worth it. Maybe not, but I wouldn't wonder anymore. The past had been loud. The betrayal had been quiet. But the peace that followed, that was mine, and it was enough.